He received his PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And before coming to OSU in 2009, he taught for 20 years in the departments of History and Environmental Studies at UC Santa Barbara. He's just been elected a fellow of the International Academy of History of Science. And his book on French tropical medicine in the 19th century is now in press with the University of Chicago Press. He's now switching from the tropics to the mountains for a new project on the history of mountain sports and the impact of climate change on the ski industry.
Okay, I think skiing is being a little bit lighter activity. I'm glad to see a couple of scientists in the audience and some folks from Andrews Forest and a couple of environmental folks here and there. I am a historian like Rod, and I won't go back to Romulus and Remus as he did in Rome yesterday, but I am interested in why it is, or how do we get from the mountains are scary, don't go in there. I don't have a picture of it. There are snow beasts that were drawn in the 18th century, the 1700s, snow beasts that would eat travelers in the Alps. And how do we get from that to the mountains are a great place to take a family and go skiing? How do we get there? And then there'll be a little coda here because we are talking about climate change on a technology, a techno-fix. I regard it actually as a techno-fix, a good bet to start out with, that is artificial snowmaking. But as long as that bet is left on the table, it's looking like it's a worse sort of bet. So a couple of slides here. I think the most important thing here, we'll talk about USA first, is that winter tourism activities, and that includes ski areas and other sorts of doing things in the outside during the winter months, account for about $12 billion in revenue per year. In terms of skiing and snowboarding, and that portion of that, there's about 55.5 million tickets that are sold a year in the United States. I'm particularly interested in really uses of mountains, but I'm looking primarily at how we got from that switch. The mountains are dangerous to the mountains are semi-domesticated, at least, to they're a good place to go. It's turning out more and more as I look at this comparative research that I've been doing, particularly between France and the USA, that the military are very interested in the mountain for a number of reasons. We'll talk about that. Secondly, you could call them tourist organizations, but they're a little bit different than that. There are mountain and alpine clubs that are focused on teaching people how to travel in the mountains safely, and we'll talk about that. We'll finish up with snowmaking. My main interest here, work that I've accomplished on this project, which I keep thinking I want to title The End of the Golden Age. So for those of you that are skiers and alpine enthusiasts, we may have lived through it, or we're on the cusp of living through that, possibly not. But my main interests are recreation and health, because there are different ways that we value mountains, and I'm particularly interested in that, as well as the military uses. I'm also interested in the response, particularly the ski area operators, to questions like, is this model, this business model, sustainable, and what are you doing to mitigate global climate change? So I'll be talking primarily about the 19th and 20th centuries, and then with just kind of a little coda on the end here with artificial snowmaking. So I want to start first in an area that I know fairly well, Grenoble, which is in southeastern France. From there we'll go to Lyon, which is to the north, and then we'll come back to America. So Grenoble has been the site of one Olympics in 1968. Charles de Gaulle, last Olympics that he attended, he spoke at it. But there have been two other Olympics, Winter Olympics, in the region, one at Albertville in 1992, and then an earlier one over the mountain in Chamonix, or Chamonix, earlier in the century. The venues for the last two of those Olympics, many of them in terms of alpine, particularly speed events, were the same venues. So the towns are fairly close to each other. An example of really this initial interest in the mountains and the way that I'm coming into it has to do with a biography of this last line here, this person, Henri Duhamel, whose dates are 1853 to 1917. He was, just very quickly, a person who was born into some wealth, lived in Paris, and at about the age of 20 decided that he wanted something different, and he moves to the outskirts of Grenoble. He'll die in 1917 training French Alpine troops in World War I. He falls into ice. Okay, so here's Grenoble. We've seen such wonderful slides today of mountains with what Bob prepared for us and then Mark's presentation. But here's Grenoble. It is an industrial city. There are two rivers that meet there, and then there are two mountain ranges that abut right up onto the town itself, and then another one that's not too far away. From downtown Grenoble, you're never far from the mountains. Here's the Vercours Plateau from downtown Grenoble as it looked in October of 2011 when I was there. Here's just walking around town. The mountains are always there. And here's the road that goes over to Geneva into Mont Blanc. Okay, archives. If you're a historian, your work begins with the archives. Now the digital archives, but for me, I prefer to touch and smell them. This one, what we're looking at here is the earliest records that I have found of the Alpine Club of Grenoble, which later on affiliates with the Federation of Alpine Clubs of France, and it's founded in 1876. Henri Duhamel is one of the founders, but he was a wise move, holds being president or an officer in society kind of at bay, because what he's doing is out trying to summit peaks, and in fact he bags almost 36 peaks in terms of first summiting. He's doing another number of other things as well, and it's said that he is the apostle of skiing in France. He goes to a World's Fair or a Universal Exposition, sees some skis that are there at the Sweden exhibit, buys 2 pairs, and then brings them back to Grenoble. This is in about 1880 or so. He then teaches people how to use these skis, and all the literature I've read said this is a real shift, because people are climbing mountains, but they tend to stay out of the mountains in winter, and now they've got this new technology that allows them to get into the mountains in winter. So here's just an example of what's in that book. This is kind of an onion skin paper, and they're copies of letters. Ski clubs, including the International or the National Federation, which draws together about 80 different regional ski clubs, they haven't done a good job keeping records. There are very few records that they have, and this is the regional groups, depending on where you're looking, their records tend to be a little bit better. This is some of the stuff that I've gone through. I don't expect you to be able to see this very well, but this is a reversal. It's also a copy of maps. That's one of the things that Henri Duhamel is doing. He's making maps. He is not only of the mountains that he's climbed, but also of the valleys. And he's also referring to moving troops through these valleys. Now, the context here for historian matters. Remember, 1870, 1871, the French lose Alsace to the Germans, and they also lose a portion of Lorraine, the eastern provinces, and they're really worried about the Germans. They're also worried about the Italians. The Swiss don't seem to bother them. But they're worried about this. I think maybe I saw Anne Nolan yesterday. She may be here as well, who has done a year abroad in Switzerland. The other thing that is very interesting about Grenoble and about the Swiss and the Italians, they study snow in many different ways. So the ski club members initially were people that were in the geosciences at the Faculty of Sciences there in Grenoble. And they're out there, I would like to call them hydrologists, except maybe the discipline didn't exist. And they're out there studying the mountains in various ways. Grenoble is a site of an institute that studies avalanches and snowfalls as well. Okay. Now, the Alps and the city, how do they get together? Well, in Grenoble, they're right there. They're right in front of you. But they've, the first urban, I like to call it a ski lift, but they call it something like a tram, a teleferique, I guess. The first one built in any major city, and that includes Rio down in Latin America, was built in Grenoble. So you can take what looks like a ski lift from downtown Grenoble, go across the river, And lo and behold, where you go, you get to go up there and go skiing. No, you don't. You get to go up to a military fort called the Bastille. It was in the 19th century, up on the hill. And I think this, in some ways, personifies some of the military interest that there is in the mountains, not only as borders, people passing through, but mountains for strategic purposes. So let me now take us to the north here, and we're going to take a look at Lyon. I've studied this and just published something on it a month ago, particularly on this personage here, Marius Pierry. He was a climatologist of renown. And what I've discovered from looking at medical climatology and study of extreme climates is that the way the discipline of studying extreme climates has matured in America, there's a lot of people that are worried about how do you survive in extreme climates. And there's a lot of other interesting things that are happening there as well. In Europe, particularly post-World War II, a lot of the interest, and post-World War I, I should say, as well, there's a lot of interest in the curative nature of mountains. Okay, so the mountains as solitude, not unlike Central Park in New York City, where it was seen like you could go there when civilization just got too much, you could go there and kind of reconnect maybe with nature in a certain way. So Marius Pierry seems to pop up in everything to do about mountains in the interwar period between World War I and World War II in Lyon. He had a military background, and also Lyon is a big army town for training not only colonial troops, but also for training military engineers. They're probably in the 1870s, about 600 to 650 Alpine troops that are training just in Lyon. And the local ski club that starts up in 1874 makes the battalion commander a member of this Alpine club of Lyon. And so there's a productive synergy that's going on there between the civilians and the military folks. By the time we get to the late 19th and early 20th century, people are using these skis and other sorts of things to get out into the Alps, but they're also taking photographs. And there's a great interest of the ski club in avalanche and avalanche deaths. So there's one particularly striking incident from 1910 where 3 of the members of the group go out in the Alps or cross-country skiing, taking pictures of each other, obviously having a good time, and then unfortunately they're caught by an avalanche. Other people go out, they find them, and then they develop the film and camera, and they publish that in their bulletin. They're also, just very quickly, linked with Lyon, a number of what I call climate modification experiments. And again, this too is linked with the military. Of all the cities of France, Lyon was the one that was most fortified with cannons. And there are 250 batteries of land-based cannons in the interwar period. And when you fire them into clouds, they do some interesting things, they find out. Now the context here is agricultural development. Lyon, just because of its topography, the Rhone Valley, and then being in the front region of Mont Blanc as it comes, slopes down to the west, has a lot of hail. And in the interwar years, for some reason, a bunch of hail storms come through and knock down crops. Several hundreds of thousands of francs lost weekly sometimes. So the Army is doing climate modification experiments of firing exploding shells into the clouds. And there are also some people that are crazy people that are involved with the ski club that are driving aircraft around and shooting exploding shells into these clouds. And allegedly then things fall as rain and not hail. Let me finish up now. And here I'm reaching back to something that Mark started with, and that's models. We're on a collision course here. Remember I said that I thought artificial snowmaking was becoming an increasingly bad bet? Well, here's why. Artificial snowmaking is first applied in New York State in 1952, and most of what I'm going to give you is from this Daniel Scott and Jeff McBoyle article, and I just want to run through a couple of charts. So after 1952, then technology becomes diffused. It's used in Europe. It's also used here in America. But if we, so do I have a cursor? Yeah, I guess I do. Okay, so this red line here is the Pacific Northwest. Here's 1974, and here is about 10 years ago. You'll notice that about 60% of the ski areas in the Pacific Northwest a decade ago had some form of artificial snowmaking. This is for Rod's benefit here. You'll notice that the Rocky Mountains, about 85% of the ski areas have some form of artificial snowmaking. And we're talking about on-site snowmaking rather than the sort of land-based snowmaking things that Vail Corporation's purchased in plunks, not in the ski area, but in passes where the predominant winds go. And then if you look up here, here's, I think, the big story, the Midwest, and also the southeast ski areas, 100% are working on using, in some way, artificial snowmaking. Now, ski areas come in different sizes and in different governance structures. Mount Ashland in southern Oregon is actually run by the municipality. But there's some very interesting things here. So the older ski areas then adopt artificial snowmaking, but a place like Deer Valley, for example, that starts up in the 1980s out by Park City in Utah, they're like a golf course. Everything is piped in with the pipes from the very start. Okay, and so these ski areas tend to be different in many ways. In fact, I've come to think of ski areas as not so wildly a lot like golf courses. Okay, just to finish up here, a couple of examples. Does snowmaking work? Yes, it does. It can extend the season of skier days by as many as 100 days or more per season, depending on the year. And here's where the model that Mark's mentioned clashes. And that is that if we take the worst case scenario in global warming and we take a look at the middle of this century, it looks like these artificial snow making machines in the Northeast will need about 50%, they'll need to double their sourcing of water. And this is running into a wall, and one of the local walls in Vermont is a thing called the February mean flow rule, which basically means that any more artificial snowmaking machines cannot source any water above whatever the mean flow is in the month of February. So basically, any economies then to keep the ski areas going are going to have more efficient machines or something like that. Now, the ski areas know how to get around this. One of the ways is that Okemo ski area, which is also in Vermont, has built a huge reservoir. And during times of the year when it's raining, they just stockpile water there, so they don't have to take it out of streams, and then that way they can get around this mean flow rule. Lastly, and I think Mark and also my wife Anita sent this one to me from the New York Times, I believe, is a case of Arizona ski bowl where they are skiing on what is basically recycled or gray water now, which is something else that golf courses often use. Arizona Ski Bowl is the largest ski area in the state of Arizona. It's directly north of, it's by the south rim actually, of the Grand Canyon, but it's in Flagstaff, so it's north of Phoenix. Very high ski area in the San Francisco mountains there. But it's also thought that the ski area is claimed to be a sacred site by First Nation people. So there have been arrests and clashes here about what is perceived by some groups as polluting their sacred site with reclaimed water. Finally, here's a little chart here about how ski areas are going to try and adapt. The important things are down here. See ski area operators, and then things split. Technological practices, business practices, indoor ski areas, that would be the ski domes such as we have in Doha, or the two that are in Japan right now. Indoor skiing doesn't seem real compelling to me. But I think this chart here kind of gives a false impression. And just to conclude here, so I'm looking at the clock, actually these are very linked. So if you look over here and look at revenue diversification, the big story in terms of ski areas adapting in terms of their revenue streams is that the total number of skier days, including snowboarders, have been flat for about a decade. Okay, more boarders, less skiers, but the total number of things sold pretty much flat, so not a growth industry. Revenue diversification that comes from the all-year resort models, such as Whistler Blackcomb up in Canada, and particularly mountain biking. Mammoth Lakes, California, case in point, a lot of the ski areas around here. Mount Hood, in particular, you see here's my carrot. Okay, so if you think about that in terms of building slopes that are appropriate for mountain bikes, that refracts back here on the slope development sort of a part that's under technological practices, and that's also linked with business practices as well. So just finally, the last, I think, sea change for this industry, or maybe not the last, but one that's very striking to me, is in the 1970s when artificial snowmaking started to catch hold in terms of ski areas, 85% of the revenue for the ski areas came from selling day passes. Now it's less than 50%. It's the amenities, the nice place to stay and whatnot. So in a nutshell, then, these are some of the issues that I'm working through. As I said, I'm starting the 19th, 20th century, early 20th century angle about how the mountains became good places to go, and looking at the various reasons that people would go to the mountains and not worry about getting eaten by the mother of all Sasquatches. Thank you.